die, and from their ashes the anointed shall rise. The brethren of Aurelius shall greet him and usher him to his immortal destiny. As it is written, so shall it be. And one of the brethren shall go out hunting the night before and get himself killed because he couldn't wait to finish his job before he ate. Oh, wait. That's not written anywhere.
Never Kill a Boy on the First Date is not highly regarded by Buffy aficionados. It is considered one of the weaker episodes in the weaker Season 1. Yet, Buffy fans also agree that in every Buffy episode there's something that makes it worth watching, and in this one, for me, it is Buffy herself. This is the cutest Buffy has ever been, and ever will be. She is just adorable throughout, when she gets sassy with Giles.
Ooh, 2 points for the Slayer, while the Watcher has yet to score.
When she gets flustered by a boy.
The Order of Aurelius is a very old and venerated sect. If they're here, it's for a good reason.
That was Owen.
When she pleads Giles to let her go on a date with him.
But, cute guy, teenager, but post-pubescent fantasies.
When she finally manages to secure his permission.
Thank you. And look, I won't go far, okay? If the apocalypse comes, beat me.
When she chooses her outfit for the date.
Pick. Okay, do I want to appear shy, coy, and naive, or unrestrained, insatiable, and aggressive?
When she's on the date and shows genuine interest in what Owen does.
Watch.
I don't get that.
It's...
When she verbally smacks down Cordelia, her rival to Owen's attention.
Oh.
Let me get that.
Thanks. Boy, Cordelia's hips are wider than I thought.
And when she celebrates her victory over her bitchy rival.
How about we meet there at 8?
Yeah, 8. There.
Savage. I love the way she casually places her tray over Cordy's lunch. Sarah Michelle Gellar makes us adore Buffy, so we really feel for her when she makes her sacrifice at the end. Apart from that, this episode is notable for moving her relationship with Angel a notch further. After we saw Buffy falling for him in the last episode, here we see Angel being jealous of Owen, and we realize he has feelings for her as well. But the main long-term significance has to do with her relationship with Giles, and the world he represents. And here, this episode actually has an interesting philosophical side. The cold opening shows Buffy slaying a vampire, only to be scolded by Giles for her technique.
Poor technique. Prioritizing subpar. Execution was adequate, but a bit too bloody for my taste.
Giles, don't mention it. It was my pleasure to make the world safe for humanity again.
I'm not saying that your methods are without merit. You're expending too much time and energy. It should simply be plunge and move on. Plunge and... Hello?
Giles wants to teach her efficiency, but Buffy is a child of the pop age. She wants to slay with style, turn it into a performance, have fun. The argument is not resolved since Giles is distracted by a ring the vampire was wearing.
I thought this vampire was just on a random kill, but it may be something else.
Something big?
Yes. I best consult my books.
And once Giles mentions books, we get to see the Master again, for the first time since the pilot. The connection between books and the world inhabited by both Giles and the Master is here established. Let's talk about books. First, let's distinguish between the Master and Giles. The former has books that were actually written, with a quill, before the invention of print. This was a time when books were considered to contain clandestine truths that were passed down through the generations, often truths that came from the mouths of deities. Therefore, they had to be hidden from the general public, held in places where only the initiated could read them. The Master still has that reverence towards his books, and considers the prophecies written in them as unshakable truths.
And in this time shall come the Anointed, the Master's great warrior. And the Slayer will not know him, will not stop him, and he will lead her into hell. As it is written, so shall it be.
The Master is here talking to a vampire sect named the Order of Aurelius. They are not named after Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, but after a 12th century vampire who made prophecies. But it is quite possible that the vampire named himself after the Roman emperor. Why would a vampire choose a philosopher's name? Maybe because of the story that Marcus Aurelius once found out that his wife was cheating on him with a gladiator. So he forced them to have sex in front of him, had his men kill the gladiator while in the act, and then made his wife bathe in his blood before having sex with her. We can see why vampires would think that this is badass. And Aurelius was a vampire who wrote books, so the name fit. He didn't write philosophy, though. One should not expect any philosophers among Season 1 vampires. They do not think for themselves, but follow the word of prophecy. Giles, on the other hand, is a librarian, in charge of printed books that are open to anyone who wants to read. The invention of print, in the 15th century, allowed books to be replicated on a mass scale, and thus capable of being read by many. This made books lose their mystique, and start to be regarded as words written by people, not given by God. It led to the weakening of the old authority institutions, like the church, and the rise of writers who claim they can employ their own brain in order to write books that give better explanation of the world and can improve people's lives. This eventually led to the modern age, in which the Western spirit no longer believed it should obey religious texts in order to get a better life in the afterworld, but instead use humanity's faculties in order to create a better life in this world. We mentioned the modern age before, as the age that preceded and gave birth to the pop age. Let's elaborate about its different periods, and the role literature played in them. The first period, between 1790 and 1840, is what I call the Romantic period. It is a period of rebellion against the old feudal world, in an attempt to create a new world. The bourgeoisie, empowered by the Industrial Revolution, rise up against the authority of the nobility and the clergy, and attempt to create a society based on the values of freedom, equality, and fraternity. The hopes are high, but they get dashed as it all descends into bloodshed, and European art reflects all of it. The mediums that express the European spirit at the time are mainly poetry and music, that break the old molds and create epic pieces of man rising up and breaking his chains. Prose, which previously was considered merely a popular form, nothing but storytelling, begins to flex its muscles as well. Now that man is put at the center of things, man's inner world becomes the focus, and no medium expresses it better than prose. The next period, from 1830 to 1875, is what I call the novel period, and this is when literature becomes the main medium, the main purveyor of the European spirit. In a way, it is the precursor to television, the television of the 19th century. Novels are published mainly as a series, in periodical literary magazines, which means that every chapter is part of the novel but is also a standalone piece, dealing with a specific theme, and there's quite a bit of filler. The culture guardians still regard it as nothing but a popular form, but there are novelists and readers who start to take it more seriously. The realist novel, which aims to faithfully describe contemporary daily life, was never seen as something that could be interesting or artistic, but now the attitude changed. A paradigm shift turned the realist novel into an important art form. What happened was this. Already in the Romantic period, some philosophers argued that the reason why humanity failed to create the perfect society is because man is not ready for it. Man started to be regarded as a being that grows through history, and did not complete its growth yet. The idea of progress, a historical process that all humanity takes part in, became the main idea, the grand narrative of the modern age. It is a process in which man explores nature and explores himself, in order to eventually achieve full enlightenment, which will allow him to create the perfect society. And in the novel period, it seemed to be working. Liberal democracies started to spread over Europe, giving sovereignty to the people and working on improving their lives. While scientists and inventors explored nature and found new ways to control it for the benefit of man, authors explored human nature. Philosophers created works that suggested how society should be constructed, while novelists created monumental, all-encompassing novels that engulfed all walks of society and focused on the humans living in them, on their inner life and their social life. Thus, the realist novel became the most important artistic medium. These authors became cultural heroes, seen as visionaries who see better than anyone into the nature of man, and thus helping us understand ourselves better and progress to a better future. In 1865 begins the third period, which I call the modernist period. By that time, the idea of progress overtook the Western mind, and people were aware that they are living in the modern age. But the period begins with the feeling that society is not progressing in the right direction, and that the modern project is failing. Contemporary culture and traditions were now seen by some as a hindrance to progress, and instead, these individuals started to feel that they can use their unique faculties to break out of these traditions, and figure out something more truthful. In art, this was a period of rebelling against all traditional concepts of beauty, imposing the personal vision of the artist instead. It happened in literature as well, although realist literature was less important in this period. The rise of human sciences, like psychology, sociology, criminology, and anthropology, meant that scientists took the place of authors in exploring human nature, and diminished their importance. Then again, this was when there was a sharp rise in literacy in Europe, one of the outcomes of the liberal order, and literature became big business, resulting mainly in the spread of popular fiction. The disappointment from reality led to the rise in interest in stories of fantasy, science fiction, horror, adventure, and superheroes, stories that became the bedrock of the pop age. The final period of the modern age, from 1915 to 1965, is what I call the late modernist period. It sees the downfall of the modern idea of progress, and the downfall of Europe that almost destroyed itself in this period. European literature reflected this reality, and offered mainly escape into the inner world, or into art, or to some faraway place. But this was also the transitional phase into the pop age. In America, literature was affected by pop, dwelling not so much on the inner world of the heroes, but on their actions in the here and now. America still produced literary heroes, but by the end of the period, it was over. In the 1960s, European philosophers were already lamenting the death of the author, the realization that authors are no longer culture heroes, no longer seen as liberators. This was part of a bigger discussion, the discussion about the death of man, the death of the idea in that universal being that grows through history, and we all take part in its growth. This marked the death of the modern age, and the rise of the pop age, that is about enhancing the now, not about progressing towards a better future. The heroes of the rock and roll period, those who were regarded as seeing deeper into the human psyche, were the music stars and the film directors. Giles, however, still belongs to the world of books. He and the Master both come from Europe. But unlike the Master, his mindset comes from the modern age. Hence, his reverence of the written word is different from the Master's.
A violent and disturbing prophecy is about to be fulfilled.
The Order of Aurelius.
You were spot on about the connection. I've looked at the writings of Aurelius himself, and he prophesied that the brethren of his order would come to the Master and bring him the anointed.
Who's that?
Well, I don't know exactly, a warrior, but it says he will rise from the ashes of the five on the evening of the 1000th day after the advent of Septus.
Well, we'll be ready whenever it is.
Which is tonight.
Giles does see authors as figures of authority, who provide knowledge, but unlike the Master, who believes that as it is written, so shall it be, he believes that man's fate is in his own hands, that he is not bound by what is written. He intends to defy the prophecy, prevent the rise of the Anointed One. In order to do that, however, he first has to deal with the question that baffled men for generations, that all the authors of all the ages, with all their wisdom, never found the right answer to.
Oh, does this outfit make me look fat?
Actually, it does make her look a bit thicker than usual, but I ain't complaining. I'm not sure I would tell that to a Slayer, though. The reason why Buffy is so concerned about her looks, and thus distracted and not taking the grave prophecy seriously enough, is, naturally...
Oh, Owen. Hi.
What do you want? A book? Oh.
See, this is a school, and we have students, and they check out books, and then they learn things.
I was beginning to suspect that was a myth.
The running gag throughout the high school years is that no students ever enter the library, which makes it the perfect headquarters for Slayer business. In the rock and roll period, as a rule, kids did not read books. The only prose that was considered somewhat cool to read was either science fiction or horror, and even then, they would mostly rather see the movie. Owen is a different kind of kid.
I lost my Emily. Dickinson. It's dumb, but I like her around. Kind of a security blanket.
Emily Dickinson was born in 1830 and wrote most of her poems, over 1,000 of them, in the 1850s and 60s. She belonged, then, to the novel period, and the novel period was not kind to poets. Since the period was all about perfecting liberal society, artists were generally measured by what they could contribute to it. Novelists were seen as valuable for teaching us about human nature and the nature of society. Poets, on the other hand, looked for individualistic ways to transcend human nature and transcend the logic of liberal bourgeois society, and were therefore regarded as useless bums. Dickinson published very little in her lifetime. Only in the modernist period, when people looked for ways to break out of liberal logic and find the truth that lies beyond, did poetry become respected again. After Dickinson's death in 1886, her family found and published her poems, and she became one of the most cherished poets of that century.
Oh, Emily Dickinson.
We're both fans.
Yes, she's quite a good poet. I mean, for
A girl?
for an American.
Buffy thinks Giles is about to express some male chauvinism, but it's a different kind of chauvinism. Erudite Europeans regarded Americans as boorish, generally incapable of creating great art. This is why American pop culture encountered resistance by European culture guardians, and why Europe didn't fully adjust to the pop age and contributed very little to the Western spirit in the rock and roll period. The exception, of course, was Britain, in which the youth completely adopted rock and roll and interacted with American youth in creating the spirit of the time. We don't know yet what Giles did in his youth, but we do know that once he became a watcher, he dove back into European culture, into the modern and pre-modern ages. So he can appreciate Owen's interests. The question is, why is Buffy so smitten by Owen?
Owen Thurman was talking to you?
It's all true.
Wow, he hardly talks to anyone. He's solitary, mysterious. He can brood for 40 minutes straight. I've clocked him.
He was so nice, it was eerie.
Okay, we get a hint that Buffy is into mysterious and broody types. Anything else?
What did you guys have to talk about?
Emily Dickinson.
He reads Emily Dickinson? He's sensitive yet manly. But wait, you've never even read her. You vixen.
So yeah, reading poetry is a good way to get the chicks to think you're sensitive. We find out later that Owen isn't that sensitive, but Willow automatically assumes it. But it goes a little deeper than that. While America took Europe's place as the conduit of the Western spirit, creating all those wonderful cultural artifacts, it still had this sense of inferiority in relation to European culture. The American elites were still thinking in European terms, and it affected the youth as well. In class, we always see Buffy and her mates studying traditional mediums like literature and theatre, mainly Shakespeare, never American mediums like cinema or pop music. Hence, Owen strikes the girls as deeper than the other boys. he actually stylizes himself as a 19th century man, including the accessories.
How about we try it again for tonight? I'll even lend you my watch.
Tonight? You and me.
In contrast, Xander is wearing a Tweety Pie watch, a pop culture thing. This is an exaggeration. Even dorks like Xander would not be wearing something so childish to high school. Until well into Season 2, Xander and Cordelia will be campy figures, often more comic than realistic. This watch is meant to show us how immature he feels, to himself and to Buffy, compared to Owen. That doesn't explain, however, why Cordelia is suddenly into Owen, who is so different from the jock types she usually dates. It obviously has to do with her rivalry with Buffy, with her noticing that Buffy is after him. But why is Cordelia so preoccupied with the outcast Buffy? Why does she see her as a rival? We get a hint, already, that Cordelia is deeper than she lets on. She is threatened by Buffy because she senses that Buffy is cooler than her, and secretly wants to be more like her. Owen, then, is the dream boy of the girls in Sunnydale High's 99 class, and it looks like Buffy is the one who is about to get him. Except...
Tonight, okay. Not okay. It can't be tonight.
My calculations are precise.
They're bad calculations. Bad.
Buffy has a really important date.
Owen.
All right, well, I'll just jump in my time machine, go back to the 12th century, and ask the vampires to postpone their ancient prophecy for a few days while you take in dinner and a show.
Buffy is persuaded, eventually, to do her duty and go with Giles to the cemetery, waiting for the Anointed to rise. Her heart is not into it, though.
Well, you know what they say. 90% of the vampire slaying game is waiting.
You couldn't have told me that 90% ago?
Well, we've certainly waited here long enough.
Besides, there aren't any fresh graves. Who's gonna rise?
Apparently no one tonight.
Then I can bail? I can go to the bronze and find Owen?
Very well then, follow your hormones if you want.
Go get him, Tiger. By the time she reaches the bronze, alas, Cordelia is already all over Owen. In the meantime, we find out that Giles was right about the time, but wrong about the place. The vampires ambush a bus and kill its 5 passengers, out of which, on the next day, the Anointed shall rise. We even see the passengers before the attack.
That day's gonna bring fire. Fire coming down. Judgment. Don't think you're ready to look upon him. If there's sin in there, there's sin all around. It's a liquid.
Once again, the show proves to be good at deception, even in these early episodes. Like in the previous 2 episodes, we are tricked into believing we know who the monster of the week is. In Witch, we thought all along that Amy was the witch, but it turned out to be her mother. In Teacher's Pet, we are first sent to hunt a vampire with a claw, only to find out that a new temp is who we should be worried about. Here, we meet a crazy preacher guy, whom we soon learn is a murder suspect. We naturally assume he will become the Anointed. As does Giles, but he isn't sure this time that he got it right, so he allows Buffy to go out on her rescheduled date, and goes to check the funeral home himself. Buffy and Owen finally have their date, and we get to a rock and roll moment. It begins with this weird shot, in which the camera rises from floor level to stage level, and only then do we clearly hear the band sound. It's as if we are rising up from the underground world of the vampires, a dead world sealed in the pages of books, to the lively world of American youth, full of sound and movement. The band is named Velvet Chain, and later they recorded a song titled Buffy, She's the Slayer, as if acknowledging, in the name of rock, that Buffy has become more iconic than any act that appeared in the Bronze. Any rock act that came after 1995, for that matter. Here, they provide the background to another important role music plays in the world of youth: romance. Allowing youngsters to connect via dancing was always one of the functions of music, and never more so than in the rock and roll period. Not all youngsters, though. The scene is meant to show us that Owen isn't into dancing. isn't into rock and roll. Earlier we saw Cordelia forcing him to dance, but Buffy is more attentive to what he wants, so they sit at the table.
The thing about Emily Dickinson I love is she's just so incredibly morbid. A lot of loss, a lot of death. It gets me. A lot about bees for some reason.
Did she have a tragic and romantic life with a lot of bees?
Quiet, kind of sequestered and uneventful, which I can really relate to. I don't get out much.
I don't get that.
It's my fault. I just find most girls pretty frivolous. I mean, there's a lot more important things in life than dating, you know?
Poets, throughout the modern age, were looking for ways to transcend the boring everyday existence in the liberal, scientific, bourgeois society. One of Emily Dickinson's major themes was the wish to escape, and death was one option that fascinated her. Her poetry often attempted to give poetic definitions to daily things, but death is something we know nothing about, something that defies definition, and several of her poems wonder about the nature of death. For Owen, her entire poetic work provides an escape from contemporary culture, which he doesn't find himself in. People who wish to totally transcend everyday reality seem more profound to him than those who find their joys in it, as kids in the pop age do. Buffy, on the other hand, knows nothing about poetry, and for good reason. Poets were still quite popular in America during the Hollywood period, and some achieved celebrity status. But in 1965, Bob Dylan fused poetry with rock and roll, showing the power of this fusion. After that, any aspiring poet knew they should express themselves through the medium of pop music, mainly rock, and later hip-hop. Poetry that is restricted to the page was no longer connected to reality, and read only by those, like Owen, who wish to escape it. He makes Buffy momentarily ashamed for being one of those so-called frivolous kids, but she snaps right out of it. She is familiar with death, familiar with the supernatural world, and she knows that the everyday, natural world is better. She is there to experience that, and she even manages to get Owen to dance with her, in earnest.
Are you having fun?
Yeah, I almost feel like a girl.
But, of course, it doesn't last, because Giles, meanwhile, goes on his own to the funeral home, and gets into trouble. Xander and Willow alert Buffy, and she immediately gets her priorities straight, kisses Owen goodbye, and goes with them. But when Owen hears the words funeral home, his morbid sense is awakened, and he tags along. It comes down to a fight between them and the preacher vampire, who is a pretty scary villain, in the mold of creepy preachers established by Robert Mitchum in the classic horror Night of the Hunter. In the fight, Owen actually shows bravery, but gets knocked out before Buffy slays. Buffy thinks she blew it with him, but is in for a surprise on the next morning.
I was wondering when I could see you again.
That was my hopeful ear. Could you repeat that?
I think you're the coolest.
Really?
I mean, last night was incredible. I never thought nearly getting killed would make me feel so alive.
So that's why you want to be with me.
Oh, absolutely.
Dude! Seriously? You couldn't say, no, it's because when I think of you, I can feel the sunshine stealing into my soul and making it all summer, and every thorn a rose? What have you been reading poetry for all those years? He said the one thing that made Buffy immediately dump him.
But he wants to be Danger Man. You, Xander, Willow, you guys know the score. You're careful. 2 days in my world and no one really would get himself killed. Or I'd get him killed.
Yeah, being stuck in the 19th century may be appealing to girls, but is not a healthy attitude towards life. Buffy and her friends have the mindset of the rock and roll period, and thus they find themselves in it, know how to have fun, and want to keep on living in it. They fight the vampires so they can keep on living. Owen, on the other hand, is looking to escape his period, and the vampires, the living dead, facilitate this morbid fascination he has. He is not more profound than our heroes. In fact, he is quite shallow. Human life is a lot richer than any book, and those who are not part of their time, those who don't know how to live in the moment are dooming themselves to a shallow existence. Giles, finally, realizes it. Seeing that Buffy is hurting, he first tells her about the sacrifice he had to make in accepting his destiny as a Watcher, establishing common ground. Then he goes on.
I have volumes of lore, of prophecies, of predictions, but I don't have an instruction manual. We feel our way as we go along. And I must say, as a Slayer, you're doing pretty well.
As much as it pains him, he admits that Buffy's insistence on doing things her way, not going by the book, is working. Giles, in time, will come to realize the power of understanding the logic of your own time and using it against those who are detached from it. It certainly seems to have worked this time.
Well, at least I did stop that prophecy thing from coming true.
You did. Handily. No more anointed one. And I would imagine the Master, wherever he is having a fairly bad day himself.
Or has it?
Welcome, my friend.
Once again, like in the previous 2 episodes, it ends on a plot twist. The Anointed One was not the crazy preacher, but the kid. The previous endings would eventually not have a continuation, but this one has consequences. The prophecy is alive and well, and we don't know yet whether it is indeed possible to defy prophecy, as Giles believes, or is the Master the one who's got it right? 3 months after this episode saw light, a little book titled Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was placed on the shelves of bookstores. It took some time to catch on, but then it became such a huge cultural phenomenon that it determined that kids in the cyber period would go back to reading books. What they read, however, is not realist novels, but fantasy. Fantasy literature revived the prose of the medieval world, the literature of the Master, and connected it to 21st century reality. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was there as this transition happened, and the way it adjusted to it, and the role it played in it, is what we shall have to explore.